All right, everyone, we have recent breaking news, which is that there is a bipartisan bill, an anti-gun bill, now semi-finalized in the Senate. They're still hammering out a few details, and of course it has to go back to the House, be debated there. Biden's itching to sign it, even though it contains virtually nothing that he actually wanted, which is really funny. And we'll get into the reaction by liberals in the last couple of hours since this news broke, because their reaction, arguably, is more visceral in dismay at the finalization, at the likely finalized version of this bill, if passed more or less as is, than even like people like me that are very pro-gun that support the Second Amendment. Of course, led by Cornyn and others, he cucked on this issue. Romney, but that was predictable. Susan Collins, that was predictable. By the way, all of these people deserve to lose their jobs, along with all of the Democrats voting in favor of it because of a couple of the elements therein. There are a couple of elements, though, that if they had passed them on their own, there would have been near unanimous support and like 99% approval from the public. I would have approved of a couple of these things, assuming that you're not abolishing the idea of the public school system and going full ANCAP or something. I do support the school safety money and mental health money provisions therein. The latter comes with a couple of caveats, but I'll get into it anyway. Link in the description, not archived. This is just a live tweet. Here are the 5 proposals that they have roughly hammered out to agree upon. The first one is red flag laws. I oppose this. It's unconstitutional. However, you have to understand exactly how they're proposing the red flag laws. It's not quite as dire as it seems. The federal government's not passing a red flag law. If it tried, a federal court would strike it down within 10 minutes and injunct it. It would not pass muster before the Supreme Court. This is simply an encouragement of states to pass red flag laws, to try to get them to do the dirty work, because the Second Amendment explicitly bars the federal government from doing so. Most states will not pass this kind of legislation. It is unconstitutional. It's been embattled in court and is continuously embattled in court. The idea of pre-crime, the idea that a person can be deprived of one of their constitutional rights based on the premise that they might commit a crime, based on some arbitrary statistical likelihood of them committing a crime. If there's no credible threat and there's no actual documented preparation for a crime, is clearly unlawful. Whether it's at the state, local, or federal level, it doesn't make a difference. I have a feeling there will be a major SCOTUS case in the future, and I don't think red flag laws will pass muster. I think they'll go the way of the dinosaur, just like the registration process, the application process rather, in New York, New Jersey, etc., currently before SCOTUS, in a case that might be decided literally tomorrow. We'll wait and see about the timeline here. We're expecting that in the next couple of weeks at least. I'm chomping at the bit waiting with regards to concealed carry. Of course, the permitting process there is very unlikely to pass through the Supreme Court. The general consensus is that that's going to get shot down. It's just a matter of whether it becomes shall issue, which means they can just up the price, and the blue states would, or if it becomes constitutional carry, which I certainly support. We'll see which one happens. I'm 50-50 on which one of those occurs at this time. So that's first. But the real skinny is that it's not a federal red flag law sort of thing. It's just encouraging states to use that system. I oppose it. It's unconstitutional. It shouldn't even be considered. The Republicans are cucking by even considering this part of this issue. However, it is not a federal red flag law. Number 2, enhanced background checks for those that are 18 to 21. This is also blatantly unconstitutional. However, there's a phase-in which is to be determined. They're not even sure when it gets implemented. So it doesn't really make any difference. It's sort of like the Real ID system, where you're going to have all sorts of biometric data in order to get on a plane. Has that actually been implemented? No. You don't need that for domestic flights in the United States. That's been the better part now of 20 years. I have a feeling that this will get repeatedly delayed, because the whole point of this, the Democrats don't want to lull in mass shootings or gun crime, because then they can push more gun control. They're waiting for a time in which they have more of a mandate in order to strip back gun ownership further. They can't do that right now, so they're not really hoping for a broad cornucopia approach with regards to gun crime, because those that are delusional enough to think that disarming people will actually help, they don't want to help. They want more shootings. They're glad that there's a rise in crime. Just like Beijing Biden is very glad that Russia right now is bombing Ukrainians. It's the best thing for his approval numbers, at least short term. Here's the problem. This particular proposal would seek to make it so that juvenile records could be referenced for those that are between the age of 18 and 21 to try to purchase a firearm. It violates the 14th Amendment. And it violates the 14th Amendment because everyone over the age of 18, they're part of the age of majority, they are part of the civilian militia. This is objective. It's been determined already by courts. There is no debate to be had. Don't let the anti-gunners fool you into thinking that there's any sort of confusion over what the militia is. If I'm 18 and I have a minor juvenile record, let's say I assaulted someone and I was 12 years old and I've got a juvenile record, a civil case against me. They're effectively saying that I can't get a gun. But when I am 22 and I go to get a gun, they can't consider that same record. It's the same crime, it's the same person, it's the same circumstances, it's the same firearm being attempted to be bought. It violates the rights of the younger individual who is a full-fledged adult and member of the militia. It violates their right to equal protection, specifically because it deprives them of the capability of using firearms, of utilizing their Second Amendment rights, and arguably also violates the Fourth Amendment. Juvenile records tend not to be referenced in such things. It's generally frowned upon. We're not even exactly sure which juvenile records. What would be the threshold? A 12-year-old has brutally assaulted someone with a baseball bat because they didn't get a candy bar. Well, maybe that gets considered. What if they stole their parents' car and accidentally, hit somebody? Accident. What if they shoplifted? Well, I mean, where's the threshold? What kind of crimes are you even going to consider here? Violates the 14th Amendment, not just the Second and arguably the Fourth. The third is to clarify FFL, basically, Federal Firearms License. This is meaningless. Nobody cares. Nobody gives a shit about this. The fourth is mental health money. This is actually a good approach. The problem is that this is subjugate to the concept of red flag, in part it seems, and mental illness is a very broad thing. The likelihood of someone who's simply chronically depressed and taking antidepressants going on a shooting spree is kind of different from someone who has some sort of raging psychotic disorder. All mental illnesses are not the same. That broad umbrella term really should be retired entirely. We should look at each particular illness so-called, and some of them are literally just so-called, in and of themselves, and see the impact on crime if you even wanted to consider that. I don't approve of doing so. I think it's false pragmatism and again violates equal protection. But if you were going to do that, you would need to consider the statistics differently. But they can't do that. They prefer the broad approach. And fifth, school safety money. It's funny because this is rankling certain Democrats. A couple of them have said, well, I have reservations about this, but I guess I'll vote for it anyway. When it hits the House, a couple of them have already said that. And the idea is to have more resource guards, et cetera, to fortify, turn the schools into a fortress. Well, yeah, I mean, they shouldn't be gun-free zones. If you're not going to allow the students to defend themselves or the teachers to defend themselves, you're going to have someone there to do it. Average response time of cops in some of the rural areas of the country can be up to an hour. In the inner cities, it's like 15, 20 minutes. School shooter goes in there, they could kill everyone in the fucking school if there's nobody shooting back at them. Of course, at the very least, at a bare minimum, and this really is a bare minimum style approach, more school resource officers. Now, what's the response been over the last couple of hours since this news broke? Among people like me, of course, I oppose much of this material. I think that these cuck-servatives should be kicked out of office. They are blatantly violating multiple constitutional amendments and not just the Second Amendment on several of these counts. What's the response from the liberals, from the anti-gun crowd? Well, this doesn't go far enough. It's a nothing burger, basically nothing. They're not giving Biden or any of these people any credit for it whatsoever. And it joys me completely. It warms the cockles of my heart, knowing, and the baby's sneezing, so just to relax about it. It warms the cockles of my heart seeing that the liberals are doing the same overstretching thing that they've been doing now for the last year and a half. They want Biden to wave a magic wand and magically make all of the guns go away. Make the big, mean, noise-bangy things go away. Then all of the children will be safe. When we're all disarmed and people invade us because we're all a bunch of cucks, the kids will be safer. But since that's not happening, because it's not pragmatic. It's not legally possible. It's not something that Biden would want to do. Even if he had the powers of an emperor, I don't think he would do that. Because even though he lacks common sense, he doesn't want the problem solved. That's the whole point of the neoliberal globalists. Create problems, maintain problems, and then extract wealth mainly from those problems existing. It's a long-term grift. It's been going on for decades. It's not going to happen. And people that are more ideologues, they don't understand political strategy, they don't understand the effective uniparty system of the neocons and neolibs. Of course, all the people signing on from the GOP are a bunch of neocons. It's a laundry list of them. Collins, Romney, Cornyn. These people are not really principled in the sense of anything conservative. They don't want to conserve anything other than their own jobs and their own pay. These people want to half-ass it. And they're not going to go after magazines, for instance, or the AR-15 in general, because some of these people live in areas where they're manufactured, and then jobs would be lost and they'd lose their job. I think this is, by the way, a good thing. It's a check on them passing even more stupid legislation. But what do the liberals say? They say, my God, you're in the pocket of the NRA. It was funny because I'm seeing multiple people proclaiming that now the NRA is like a major sponsor of this policy. I don't think they've come out in favor of red flag laws, although they are cucks as well. They are like the Cornyns and the Romneys, certainly on the GOP side, or the Mansions and Cinemas, really, of the Dems. They're not really principled in being pro-gun. They're just less anti-gun than some of the real out there people. They want to freeze gun control. They just don't want more than we already have. As opposed to like myself, I think that it should all be abolished. It's all blatantly unhelpful. It's all blatantly unlawful. We should just scoot it into the dustbin of history. It really starts with the Crookshank decision about 100 years after the U.S. was founded anyway, when the Ku Klux Klan wanted to disarm a bunch of former slaves. We should just get rid of it entirely. Now, the FFL one, nobody cares. Mental health, school safety, well, it's not an impediment to using guns. The latter one is actually a good idea. I would support it, generally speaking. Red flag laws, again, it's just a suggestion to the states. It's not going to cause Oklahoma to pass a red flag law, so to speak. But it'll convince blue states to do so, for what very little it's worth. And then you'll have the background check system, but that's to be determined as to whether it's even going to be implemented. There's no time frame given. They didn't even give a time frame for this. Could be 20 years from now when it's phased in. So basically, at the end of the day, the liberals are kind of correct. It is kind of a nothing burger. But in principle, it's still selling out by the people voting for it. It's still blatantly unlawful. It's blatantly unconstitutional on 3 different counts. Not just the 2nd, but also the 4th and 14th Amendments. It should not be passed. And now we have an interesting moment. I'll close with this, in which if it fails, it'll be because House Democrats, far left ones, think it doesn't go far enough and refuse to vote for it out of principle, like the Geek Squad, the AOC crowd. That could actually happen. We'll wait and see. That's about all. Peace out.